So what I'd like to cover today, what I hope we'll do, and we may move through some of this kind of quickly, but there's a few moving parts to accounts payable, and we want to make sure we touch on all of them. Kind of at the centerpiece of accounts payable is the vendor records. These are the people that you're doing business with, that you write checks to, that send you bills that you pay. So we want to have vendor records for those. So I want to take a look at that record window, the tabs and the information that's on there, and how we set those up, because it's also going to influence some of our end of year functions as well. So getting things set up well up front can save us some heartache down the road. Then we'll take a look at how you actually enter an invoice into the accounts payable system. We've gotten a bill from somebody, or somebody has got a credit card receipt that they've handed you. How do we put that into the system so that we have a record of something that needs to be paid? We'll look at the next step of the process, marking invoices for payment. And when we mark invoices for payment, we also think about, how am I paying this? And so I have the options of paying these bills with a check. More and more, we're starting to use online banking. So how do I record the paying of an invoice or the paying of a bill as an auto draw or as an electronic draw out of my checking account? And less are we doing individual expenses with checks, but a lot of transactions are now being done with credit cards. And a lot of churches, organizations have business credit card accounts. And so how do we manage that? How do we use those accounts and track those expenses in accounts payable and make sure we get those bills paid at the same time, being able to keep up with the individual transactions that make up what comes in on a credit card statement. We'll also look at the times when we're not necessarily going to pay an invoice right on this date, but the payment of the invoice may actually fall even into another accounting period from when we got the bill. Well, how do we accrue that invoice so that that expense shows on our income and expense statements, and the fact that we still owe that money shows on our balance sheet, so that we're getting that accurate picture of our financial situation when we print those financial statements. We will touch some on how to manage those business credit card accounts. I think, because of the increasing trend toward the use of credit cards to manage and handle those expense transactions, that we need to spend just a little bit of time showing how to do that. And so as we're going through these topics, we'll touch on the places where we manage those business credit card accounts. So without further ado, let's start by looking at vendor records. And this is the vendor record window in CDM Plus Accounts Payable. Now, all of our access into this, I tend to be a menu-driven person. It's, I think, a function of my age, in that I tend to go to menus. You can also find these off of the welcome windows, the welcome to CDM Plus accounting. Off the menus, to get to vendor records and everything with accounts payable, I go to Program, Accounting, Accounts Payable, and then there are my vendor records. If I were coming at this off of Welcome to Accounting, then I can actually, off of Getting Started, go to the Set Up Vendors selection. And again, that opens this vendor record window. So I've opened up my vendor records. I have the electric company selected here just as our starting example. So when we go to create a vendor record, we need to have a vendor name. CDM Plus, when you add a new vendor, will generate a vendor code. You can also change this, but your vendor codes need to be unique. He won't let you create a duplicate code. So address information. If this is a vendor that you would have an address record for in CDM Plus membership, I can use this checkbox and actually link the vendor record and the address record together. And that can save me some time, in that I only have to change an address in one place if an address needs to be changed. Have a phone number, email address, website, just general information about the vendor. Have an account number. and check the box or not check the box that says, when I print a check for this vendor, I want to put the account number on the memo line. What are the default terms for an invoice? And this last item can be a real time saver because you can set up a default expense or liability account for this vendor so that when I go to enter a new invoice, for example, for the electric company, I don't have to always look up what's the account number for the electricity account. I've got that set up as the default account for the electric company. So when I go to enter that invoice, by default, he's going to book it against this expense account. Now we can change that. We can break the statement out when we go to actually create the invoice into different expense accounts, different line items. But this default account can be a real time saver. If this vendor is an individual or business that needs to receive a 1099, what you'll want to do, and let me just switch to one of my vendors that is a 1099 vendor, and that's this Ronnie Fields. And note that on this vendor, now here in the lower right-hand corner, I have marked that this vendor receives a 1099 miscellaneous, and I have entered the recipient's tax ID number. It goes in this 1099 recipient's ID. If I have a 1099 vendor, then I'm going to quickly look over here on the 1099 setup tab. And this is where we say when we print the 1099 for this vendor, what box does this income to them need to be reported in? And for Ronnie Fields, we have box 3 marked. We might also have box 7 marked for non-employee compensation. The 1099 setup tab completes that information so that when we get to the end of the year and it comes time to print W-2s and 1099s, we can print those with confidence because we've set this information up correctly at the very beginning. I can also mark a vendor as being inactive. If I have vendors marked as inactive, then those will be filtered out. So it's a way of not losing my vendor information, but being able to kind of keep things uncluttered. I can create a miscellaneous vendor. And if I mark a vendor as being miscellaneous, this is a vendor that I can now use for some of those one-off kind of checks that I need to write or bills that I need to pay. So a miscellaneous vendor lets me change the vendor name on the fly and again do those kind of one-off pieces. If we are managing credit cards through accounts payable, which I recommend that we do, then I would mark this checkbox for credit card company. And in my database, I have the Chase Bank that we have our credit card accounts through. Now, I have this set up as one vendor because a lot of business credit card accounts are set up as one account that have multiple cards on them. And so I may have 4 cards on the account, but I get one statement and I write one check to pay the bill. So because I get the one statement and I write the one check, I just have this one credit card company. So I've marked this checkbox as a credit card company, and that opens up this accrue charges to liability box. And so we've set up that when I accrue charges to this credit card account, it's going against this 2510 liability in my chart of accounts that is that office credit cards account. For any vendor, I can go to the Invoices tab and see any invoices that are currently outstanding. For example, this is a test database. I have an invoice from 2014 that continues to be in here. I have an aging for those invoices. And I can also see the detailed line items because I have this invoice selected. I can see the line items that are on that invoice. I can go to the Payments tab and see payments that have been made to that vendor. Again, with a payment highlighted here in the left-hand column, I can also see the individual detailed line items that go with that payment. In this case, there was just the one, that bill for $82. And the same here. I highlight a different payment and I'm seeing the detailed line items that are there. We can also set up recurring transactions. That's not something I'm going to go into any detail about today, but for example, we have set up a budget payment for the gas company, for the gas bill. So we set that up as a recurring transaction and we can go in and automatically generate those invoices on the correct day of the month for that payment. You can see that in this case, it's on the first day of the month. Again, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about recurring transactions other than just to mention them here. And that really covers what we will need to do with vendor records. I'll go back over here to the Name tab and choose the electric company again. So let's go take a look at how we enter invoices. So for example, I have gotten the bill from the electric company. How do I get that into my accounts payable system so that I have a record of what needs to be paid? Again, I drive off the menus, so I would go to Program, Accounting, Accounts Payable, Invoices. And that opens up my Invoices window. I'm going to get my vendor records out of the way here. And that opens up my Invoices window. So again, like any other record frame in CDM Plus, I can click All to show me all of the invoices in my system. I can do searches on due date or date entered. So if I wanted to find all the invoices that I've entered since January 1st of 2018, again, you can see that I'm working in a test database here. I just have the one. But I can do searches for invoices just like I can do searches in any other record frame in CDM Plus. I can also click Show All and see all of the invoices in my system. And again, like other record frames, I have the Configure button where I can control what columns I see and how records get filtered that show up here. And I can do all those searches. And if I need to enter a new invoice, just like in any other record frame, I'm going to click Add if I just have the one. If I'm doing adding multiple invoices, then I might use the multi-add button to do that. We're just going to enter the electric bills. I'm going to click Add. And he gives me a blank window. I can click on the blue file folder icon here. And what that does is lets me choose a vendor off the list. So this is Big City Electric Company. So I'm going to double click that. And note again, he's already gone in here and knows what my default expense account is for this vendor. So my electric bill for this month, it's a summer month, it's $324.75. The invoice came today and it's due on the 25th. And it was invoice number 67843-002. So he's already plugged in the amount on this line item. Again, if I needed to do a breakout across multiple expense accounts, I can do that. I use the Add button here in the lower left, and that would give me a new detail line item, and he would force me to keep things in balance. So if I entered 300 for here and did Add, he would automatically fill in 2475 as the remaining amount. And that's really all there is to adding the invoice. So if I've done that, I click Save. And now I've got that invoice in my system. Let's see, it's up here in my results list. I've got it here. I want to point out to you the little green jump icon here. So I'm seeing my payee as Big City Electric. If I click that green icon, that's going to jump me over to that vendor's information. So there he is. He opened up the vendor records window with Big City Electric highlighted. If I go to the Invoices tab, well, there's the invoice that I just entered. And we can see the line items that are in that. So that's how we add an invoice. That was so easy to do. Let's do another one. We get the gas bill at about the same time, so I click Add, click the blue file folder icon. I get the vendor list, gas company. Their bill was for $76.89. They billed us on the 31st. It's due on August 20th, and it was invoice number 56789A. I can type in a description. And again, I could add other detail line numbers. He's keeping track of the vendor here in this field. And that's all there is to that. So I'm ready to save that. So now I've entered the gas bill. Again, I can click the green jump icon if I needed to go over to the vendor. I could also use the jump to vendor under the Go section in the sidebar here. Sidebar, again, like other record frames, guides me towards other things I can do. So I can go directly from here to mark invoices for payment or to accrue invoices. So I've got invoices in my system. I'm ready to pay them. Maybe it's been a couple of days. Maybe I'm the person that enters invoices and somebody else pays them. Again, accounts payable lets me keep up with that. I've got the data entry done. So now it's Friday, it's check writing day, so that we can be ready for the treasurer to sign checks on Sunday. So I'm going to go to Program, Accounting, Accounts Payable. And I'm going to mark my invoices for payment. And that opens up the Mark Invoices window, and you can see the two invoices that I just entered for the gas company and for the electric company. So this is all of the invoices that I currently have outstanding. I'll just point out quickly, I've got for the Kentucky State Treasurer here, if we have payroll set up to link to accounts payable, then when I run a payroll, then payroll will automatically generate the invoices that I need to pay my tax liabilities. So you can see those in there as well. But today we're interested in the gas bill and the electric bill. That's what we need to get paid. Note down here across the bottom, how are we going to pay this? And you can pay attention to the colors as well. We've got check selected here, and that's blue. I've got credit card, and that's red. And I've got auto draw, and that's green. If I'm paying out of an asset, either by a check or by an auto draw, what's the asset account that I'm using? I can drop that list down. I'm choosing the checking account. If I'm doing this to a credit card, if I'm paying this expense by a credit card, I have that card vendor chosen here. Right now, we're just going to stick with I've gotten this bill. We're going to write a check to pay it so that the treasurer can sign it. I'm going to point out to you again, right here at the very bottom, I have $8,752.57 in outstanding invoices. I've got a little cleanup to do in my test database. Then I've got these three fields here, and again, note the colors. I've got 0 in blue, like the check. I've got 0 in red, like the credit card. I've got 0 in green, like the auto draw. So as I'm going through here, I don't necessarily have to stick with one payment method. I can get all of this work done, and CDM Plus is going to keep track here at the bottom of what I'm doing with what method. What we're going to do, I've got check highlighted here. If I just go up and click on the gas company, note that the gas company turned blue. And what that says is I'm going to pay this bill by writing a check. And down here at the bottom, $76.89 is going to come out of my checking account here. I'm going to write checks totaling $76.89. If I click on Big City Electric Company, again, turns blue. My amount here in blue increased. If I click it again, it just goes back and forth. If I were going to pay this with an auto draw, then I would select that, click it again. Notice that it turned green and the icon here at the left turned to a $sign, and note how my information at the bottom changed as well. I'm going to do both of these with checks, but you can see how easy it is to pay these bills out of an asset account, either by writing a physical check or by recording what I've done through an electronic banking transaction. So now when I go to save, CDM Plus says, okay, the next step would be to go ahead and write the checks. Do you want to go to that window? I can go there now. I can do it later by going back to Program Accounting, Accounts Payable, and choosing Write Checks. I'm going to go ahead and select Yes here. And that opens up the Write Checks window. So you can see what's going to happen. I'm going to write a check to A&M Gas Company. CDM Plus is keeping track of my check numbers. So my starting check number here is 1109. If I needed to change that, I can do that here. And then he'll follow that up by writing check number 1110 to Big City Electric. That all looks good. That looks like what I was planning to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click Write Checks. Normally I would write these to a printer. I'm just going to print this up to the screen so we can see what it looks like. And there's my check. You can see he wrote check number 1109 to Big City Electric. I've got the vendor information, the account information on the check stubs. We're good to go. So I've now written my checks. And the next step in the process is, okay, we've written the checks. Are you ready to post these to your general ledger? Again, I could do this off of the menu at a later time. I'm going to choose to go ahead and take care of all this right now. So I'm going to click yes. I want to go post payments. CDM Plus opens up the posting window and says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to post a 401.64 credit to the checking account. We're going to post these two debits against these account numbers. That all looks good. I check to print report after posting. Let's go for it. Let's post to the ledger. Where do I want to send my posting report? We'll just go to the screen. It tells me my posting is complete. And there's my posting report. So I can store this in a PDF or I can print out a hard copy to store in a binder. So now this is all tied directly into, I didn't have to mess with ledger entry windows in my accounting system. The accounts payable system took care of all that for me. Let's look at an invoice that we might accrue. I'm going to go back to accounts payable. Open up the Invoices window again. Let's add a new invoice. This was for the furnishings company. I'm good at forgetting to double click on those. So this was a major expense. We spent $1,457 on new furnishings for a room that we've just remodeled, and we were billed for that on July 28, and that's due for payment on August 25th. And put in their invoice number and save the invoice. Now, one thing to note is at this point, nothing has happened in the general ledger related to this transaction. All we have done is entered an invoice into accounts payable. This invoice right now would not be reflected on our financial statements anywhere. So that only happens in one of two cases. Either when I pay the invoice and then post those payments to the ledger, then that creates the necessary entry against the asset and the expenses so that my balance sheet is up to date and my income and expenditures is up to date and my fund activity statement is up to date. Or if I accrue the invoice. If I mark this invoice and say, I'm not paying this right now, but I'm getting this expense recorded onto my financial statements. So I'm going to use the Accrue button in the sidebar on this invoice. And that opens up the Accrue Invoices window. I'm going to accrue this to my accounts payable liability account in my chart of accounts. So I open up, I selected that invoice, and save it. So now I have that invoice accrued to my chart of accounts. If I go and run an income and expenditure statement, put that up to the screen, you can see that even though I haven't actually paid the bill yet, I've marked my financial statements reflect that the church has incurred this expense already. And if I run a balance sheet, then we see that reflected it's actually an increased amount in my accounts payable. So I'm showing that liability, I'm showing the expense. The current financial state of the church is accurately reflected because I accrued that invoice even though I wasn't ready to pay it at this time. When I go to pay invoices, then I have a tab here for accrued invoices. There's my church furnishings company. So I can select that. And again, it works like the unaccrued invoices tab. I had check selected. So when I click this, I've said I'm going to write a check for this. And go ahead, and if I were to go ahead and save this, we'd go through that same process. Do you want to go to write checks? We write the checks. Do you want to go to post payments? And he would make the necessary entry to debit accounts payable and credit the checking account that I wrote the check out of. So that lets me keep the ability to accrue, lets me make the journal entries necessary that my financial statements always accurately reflect the financial state of the church. So that's how we pay and accrue invoices. Let me show you how we might handle credit cards. I'm going to click cancel here. And this really is as simple as marking a transaction, entering an invoice, and then marking it as paid by credit card. So here are my currently open invoices. I'm going to highlight this one from the Christian Church Publishing House. I'm the pastor, and I went to our state convention, and they had a bookstore set up there, and I used my church credit card to buy books for $39.95. I came back, and I handed that receipt to the bookkeeper, who then entered that as an invoice in accounts payable. So we may have, in reality, we would have several of these entered. Well, then the credit card statement comes in. And so what I'm now ready to do is go and mark this transaction. And I'm going to mark this as credit card. And notice I've got my bank chosen here, that card vendor that I had set up for the Chase Bank. You remember I had this vendor marked as credit card. So I click OK. That opens up the Mark Invoices window. And again, notice we've chosen credit card. We have this highlighted in red. We have the card chosen here. I'm going to click Save. Now again, like a payment, he says, are you ready to go to your post payments window? So I'm going to say yes. He opens up the post payments window and shows me what we're going to do. That we're going to enter a credit against this liability account. We're going to enter a debit against this expense account. So I'm going to have the expense recorded. It's going to show up on my financial statements. My financial statements are also going to indicate this balance on the credit card. I'm going to go ahead and post that. Put my posting report up to the screen. And there's my posting report again, showing what we did on the ledger to reflect the financial status of the church. Now, keep in mind, all I've done at this point is posted that to the credit card. We haven't actually paid the credit card yet. So when that statement arrives, however, in accounts payable, I can go back over to mark invoices to pay. Then over here on accrued invoices, remember that action to the credit card was an accrual. I have now the invoice for the credit card. Now again, this is probably several transactions. If folks turn in receipts as they make charges, then you're able to enter those as invoices and put them on the credit card in anticipation of the day that the statement comes in. You may need to, I was never the best at having all of my receipts and turning them in as I went. I was bad about having an envelope in a drawer or in my car, where these receipts ended up. But you'll be able to, from the statement, from the receipts that you've been given, put together something that balances with the credit card statement, accrue those things to the credit card, and then when you're ready, you come over here and either by electronic transfer with an auto draw, let's do that this way. So I've gone into my electronic banking, and we're paying the credit card, $39.95. I click save. Would you like to go to write checks? He's marking this as an auto draw. Again, we're not writing a physical check, but we are able to print a record of the auto draw. Where do you want to send it? I'm going to send it up to the screen. So now I have a piece that I can print or that I could save to PDF to have a record of the auto draws that I made. Again, once we're done, the next step in the process, do you want to go post this payment? Yes, I do. He opens up a posting window that shows me what he's going to do. We're going to send that up to the screen. Posting is complete. And I have a posting report that reports that we did a credit against the checking account and did a debit against that credit card account for Chase Bank. So accounts payable is a very handy way. I really like this for entering those expenditure transactions into the accounting system. It keeps me out of trying to do everything through ledger entries. Certainly with credit cards, trying to do those with ledger entries can get really cumbersome. If I'm able to enter those charges and those transactions as we go along, it feels easier to me. I like being able to enter a bill into the system when it comes in, then not worry about it until it's time to actually write the checks and get those ready for the treasurer or whoever your check signer is to sign those checks. Or if I'm going to go in at one time and do the electronic banking for a number of transactions. Again, accounts payable really lets me keep up with that record keeping as well. Your church may do something. I worked with a Methodist church that owes a portion of their offerings to the conference as an apportionment. So when they get an offering on Sunday, they take a percentage of that, enter it into accounts payable as an invoice. So each week they're able to keep up with what they owe for their apportionment, and then just once a month go in and mark those for payment and pay all of that to the conference with one check rather than writing checks every week. So again, I think using accounts payable for recording and managing your expenditures will really help simplify the process, and I think give you better record keeping along the way. How do you clean up the check invoices to pay window? This is going to sound like a flip answer, but the answer really is pay your bills. The situation that you're seeing in my test database is the fact that it's a test database, that I've got things in there that have accumulated over time. When I've tested payroll, I've got payroll liabilities that are in there. You can certainly go in, ledger accounts payable, come into the invoices window. Let me do a show all. Again, that write checks or mark invoices to pay window shows everything that's currently unpaid. But for example, if I have this May 11th, this Quill Corporation, oh, wait a minute, that got entered by mistake, I can always come over here to the delete button and get that one out of the way. So like other deletes in CDM Plus, I have to go through the process of saying, yes, this is what I want to do. And so now that one's gone. So I can do some cleanup that way off of the invoices window. Let's see, I've got another question on the chat room. Can you say something about basic AP accounts versus ones that have their own liability accounts? Also, what happens if we have a bill that's part AP and partly coming in from payroll? I'm trying to imagine the scenario of a bill that's part accounts payable and partly a tax liability or a deduction that is owed from payroll. So again, if I've got a deduction in payroll that's marked like for a pension plan, and we've withheld money that we then need to pay into, say, a denominational pension plan, then I'm showing that liability. If I've matched it up with a vendor in payroll, then that invoice is going to show up in accounts payable just like my other invoices, and I'm going to mark them and pay them. Oh, okay. I think as you like a healthcare savings account or a pension withholding. Again, what we need to do is make sure that in payroll, when we set up that deduction, that we match that deduction to a vendor. On those vendor records, again, because the other thing I'm going to do in payroll is I'm going to indicate the liability for those vendors that we create accounts payable, we create invoices coming out of payroll. On their vendor record, I would not put a default account on that. I would use the default account in payroll to do that, or make double sure that the default account that I've put on that vendor record is the same default account that I put in payroll. So if I've got a liability account indicated in payroll, make sure I've got that same liability account or no default account on that vendor record in AP. And again, payroll is going to create that accounts payable invoice for you. So for example, in my particular denomination, we don't withhold for the pension plan. Those dues are actually paid by the church on behalf of the minister or on behalf of the church staff. And so that's an invoice just like any other. But I could also, for example, in my denomination's pension plan, have a 403B kind of defined contribution, defined benefit plan where there was something withheld from my pay. And when we ran payroll, we actually indicated that deduction, we gave it a liability account, we indicated the vendor, and so that invoice got created for me. And so when I go to mark invoices for payment, that one's there, and I just mark it and pay it. If I have other invoices from that vendor, for in my case, the pension fund of the Christian church, then I can mark all of them for payment and write the one check. Yeah, employee contribution to health insurance the same way. Make sure that got it set up in payroll with the correct vendor, the correct liability account, so that we can mark it correctly for payment. So again, not seeing any more questions, I will thank you for taking the time to join the class today. I hope it's been helpful to you. Thank you for spending some time with me, and y'all take care.